Look at that, looks like Freddy Krueger showed up for work today, Davidson shouted, slamming his hand on the table hard enough to rattle the plates. Hey, monster. Bring more coffee over here and be careful not to spill it with those burned-up hands. Cruel laughter exploded through Ray's diner like a fire alarm. Every eye turned toward Keisha, who stood calmly holding the coffee pot, her scarred hands visible, even through the rolled-up sleeves of her white server uniform, the burns creeping from her fingers all the way up her forearms. Keisha Johnson, 34, had faced far worse than middle-aged men like Davidson and his crew white-collar clowns, who came in every Tuesday, acting like their mediocre lives gave them a right to insult others. What they didn't know was that each insult they spat only added fuel to something quietly building inside her, a strength they would never understand. I bet she got burned in some ghetto fire, Brett Davidson's accountant muttered, just loud enough for Keisha to hear. Or maybe blew her house up cooking meth. Davidson roared with laughter. Or her boyfriend set her on fire. You know how it is. In that community, domestic violence is basically a family tradition. Keisha stepped toward their table, her posture straight, footsteps steady. She didn't bow her head, didn't flinch, didn't give them the humiliation they so desperately craved. She poured the coffee with the precision of a surgeon, every movement deliberate and exact. Would you gentlemen like anything else? She asked, voice calm to the point of unsettling. Davidson squinted at her, thrown off by her composure. Oh yeah, he sneered, leaning forward with a cruel glint in his eyes. Tell us where'd those scars come from, accident, or did someone finally teach you a lesson? For a split second, something flickered in Keisha's eyes. Not fear, not shame, but the gaze of someone who had stared down death and decided not today. But Davidson was too drunk on his own malice to notice. Work? Keisha replied bluntly, turning to leave. What kind of work turns someone into that? Brett scoffed. Bouncer at a nightclub, streetwalker. Careful, Keisha said, turning back slowly, her eyes locking onto Brett's. Just one word, but the way she said it thickened the air like a storm rolling in. There are stories far more dangerous than you think. Davidson laughed again, but this time it was a little forced. Oh, look out, boys. The monster's gonna burn us like they burned her. What they didn't realize was that while they ran their mouths, Keisha was already cataloging everything: names they slipped out, faces, little personal details they unwittingly shared every week. Her military-trained mind worked like a data engine, recording it all, preparing for something they'd never see coming. Across the diner, a man in his 40s watched the scene unfold with growing discomfort. His name was James Wright, just passing through town, seated quietly in a booth for a coffee break on a cross-state drive. But what he saw stirred something in his gut. It was something about Keisha's stance, the way she held her calm under verbal fire. James had seen that kind of stillness before, in places where one wrong move meant the difference between life and death. Keisha wiped down a nearby table, whispering to herself like a mantra. If you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Out of place, maybe, but for her, it was a lifeline. Because none of you have any idea what this monster is really capable of. Under the harsh fluorescent lights of a cheap Texas diner, Keisha endured insults that would break most people. But behind those eyes burned a secret one that could crush the smug little world those men thought they ruled. Because sometimes the people the world underestimates the most are the ones holding the power to destroy it. Davidson wasn't satisfied. Keisha's indifference only amplified his obsession with control. Her strength threatened him, and that to someone like Davidson was unacceptable. Work, huh? He mocked, parroting her with dripping sarcasm. What kind of job is that, sweetheart? All I see is coffee and rag duty. Doesn't exactly scream danger zone. Brett cracked up. Maybe she used to work at a BBQ joint and got burned, or at a dry cleaner's surrounded by chemicals right up the alley of someone like her. Keisha stopped wiping the table. Her movements grew deliberate, purposeful. When she turned to face them, James noticed something the other men hadn't: a subtle shift in how she distributed her weight on her feet, like someone preparing for something. Someone like me? Keisha asked, her voice still calm, but this time with a new undertone that made Davidson pause slightly. Well, he quickly recovered. You know, people who do manual work, not the kind of job that needs brain power. That's when James saw what made his heart pound. As Keisha bent down to pick up a fallen napkin, her sleeve slipped up slightly. It wasn't just the scars, there was a faint tattoo, just a few characters, but unmistakable to anyone who had served in the military. Interesting, Keisha murmured, not clear if she was speaking to anyone in particular. Manual labor, huh? That's a good way to describe carrying wounded soldiers through gunfire on the front lines. Davidson blinked, confused. What was that? Nothing, Keisha returned to her neutral tone. You want to pay the bill? Or would you rather stand here all day judging someone's appearance? The shift in her voice unsettled Davidson, but instead of backing off, he grew angrier. Listen here, you rude little, he stood up abruptly. You'll show us some respect. We're customers and you're just what Keisha turned fully to face him for the first time since they entered. Her eyes locked onto his, and he instinctively took a step back. James Wright clenched his fists. He knew that look, that stance. The way she held her arms slightly apart, ready to react, not just to defend her dignity, but as someone calmly calculating threat levels. An employee, Davidson finally finished trying to sound authoritative again. And an employee should know her place. My place, Keisha repeated slowly as if tasting every syllable. Yeah, I should know. The thing is, you lot have no idea what my real place is. The tension in the diner tightened like a pulled wire. Other customers stopped eating. Some discreetly pulled out their phones, others just stared frozen. The manager, Tony, poked his head out from the kitchen, worry written all over his face. But when he saw Keisha's stance, he stopped. He'd worked with her for 2 years, always calm professional, swallowing every insult. But today there was something different, like a storm gathering in the air. Davidson kept going drunk on the illusion of power. I bet you didn't even finish high school. Just look at you. Those scars probably came from some street fight. People like you are nothing but trouble. That was the moment her gaze changed. James saw it, a barely perceptible shift, but unmistakable to anyone who'd been in combat. It was the look of someone who'd made a decision, no more backing down. Street fight. Keisha gave a cold smirk. Fascinating. People like you always assume the worst. Never consider that maybe, just maybe, these scars came from something greater. Davidson laughed loudly. Greater. Look at you, you work in a roadside diner. What's so great about that? Keisha slowly stepped toward their table, every movement intentional like a chess piece closing in. When she stopped beside Davidson's chair, she leaned in slightly and whispered, just loud enough for him to hear. The difference between you and me is, you judge people by how they look. I judge them by what they do when no one's watching. Davidson's spine went cold. There was something in her voice, a calm certainty that triggered every primal alarm in his body, but his pride still overrode his sense. Are you threatening me? He tried to keep his tone steady, but it came out louder than necessary. Threatening Keisha straightened her voice back to that composed, even tone. No, just pointing out that sometimes people judge the wrong person, and by the time they realize it, it's too late. Every insult they'd thrown at her only fed something inside Keisha that none of them could see. A quiet power forged by the very injustice they hurled at her. They didn't know they were writing their own indictment, one cruel word at a time. James Wright couldn't stay silent any longer. 15 years in the military had taught him how to recognize a veteran even when they tried to hide it. The stance, the eyes, the control, Keisha had it all. Davidson flopped back into his chair, smug, thinking he'd won. James got up, walked over to the counter to order another coffee, but never once took his eyes off Keisha. She walked past, and James said softly, "Excuse me, could I have a word with you?" Keisha gave him a quick once-over, the kind of look from someone who's used to spotting military men. "Sure, but make it quick, I've got other tables to cover." "That tattoo on your arm," James murmured. "First Infantry Division, the big red one." Keisha's body tensed for a split second. "You served in Marines? 2 tours in Afghanistan?" James replied. "You've clearly seen some stuff yourself." He glanced over at Davidson, who was loudly cracking a joke to Brett. "Those idiots have no idea who they're messing with," Keisha smirked. "Not the slightest clue." "Combat medic," James guessed, noting the precision in the way she handled things and how she responded when someone was hurt. "Combat trauma specialist. 3 tours in Iraq." Keisha nodded. And yes, you're absolutely right, they have no idea. While Keisha and James were talking, Davidson had pulled out his phone and started recording. He stood up, raised his camera, and yelled so everyone in the diner could hear. Hey folks, check this out. Here's the freak show waitress serving us coffee. Look at that burnt-up face. Keisha slowly turned around, her eyes locking on the camera lens. But instead of the shame or anger Davidson was hoping for, she smiled a cold, calm smile that made James shiver. Because he recognized that smile. It was the look of someone who had made a decision it was time to strike back. Keep filming, Keisha said softly. I'm sure you'll want to save this moment for memories. Davidson sneered, misreading her calm for submission. See that? She likes the attention. Bet she's got an OnlyFans for freak face fetish dudes. But James saw what others didn't. In a split second, Keisha scanned Davidson like a soldier sizing up a target, calculating trajectory impact point. Not anger, but cold, tactical analysis. You know what? Keisha stepped up to Davidson's table, her voice cool and steady. You're right. I am used to being on camera. Davidson kept filming, puffed up like he was giving a keynote. Oh, yeah. Tell me more about your on-camera experience. Keisha pretended to think. I've been filmed getting a military medal, dragging men out of gunfire, receiving commendations for bravery, stuff like that. Her tone was so sincere that Davidson paused for just a second, then burst out laughing. Yeah, right. And I'm George Washington. You a soldier? Get real. But people nearby were starting to pay more attention. Her stance, her words, they carried a precision that didn't feel made up. James understood she was planting doubt. Keep filming, Keisha said, staring straight into the camera. By the way, can I get your full name? So when this video goes viral, people know exactly who the star is. Davidson Mitchell, he said proudly. Mitchell and Associates. Google it. Successful firm, successful man. I'm recording a failure of an employee right here. Mitchell and Associates, Keisha repeated, locking it in. Fascinating. What do you guys do? Business consulting. We help companies get rid of problematic employees. Davidson looked her dead in the eye, emphasizing the word get rid of. James saw Keisha processing all of this like a tactical computer. She was filing away names, positions, forming a plan. Kesha turned and called out, Tony, can you come out here for a second? The manager appeared hesitant. Keisha, let's not blow this up. It's nothing, she said sweetly. I just want you to witness that Mr. Davidson Mitchell of Mitchell and Associates is filming me using my full name and image and making public comments about my appearance. Tony blinked, awkwardly nodded. Okay. Kesha turned back to James. Thanks for the intro. Let's talk more after my shift. Davidson was starting to get irritated by how calm Keisha remained. Hey, stop acting like you're in control of this. You're just a burnt-up waitress. Nobody wants to be near. You're right. Keisha nodded. I'm just a waitress. Someone you consider invisible, harmless, not even worth noticing, yet I've been watching and remembering everything. There was something in her voice that made Davidson pause for a beat. Remembering what he asked, suddenly uneasy. You'd be surprised, Keisha shrugged. What an invisible person can overhear, especially when your little meetings happen here every Tuesday in the same spot. Then she smiled. Go ahead and keep filming. I'm sure your clients would love to see how you treat the lesser folks. And that was the moment Davidson realized he had said far too much over all those Tuesdays. About shady contracts, about ways to skirt the law, about discriminatory firings. All right in front of a waitress he never bothered to acknowledge. James saw it the exact second Davidson's pride began to fracture. What replaced it was fear. As for Keisha, she knew she had collected enough intel for her opening strike. Gentlemen, she said, sliding her pen back into the apron pocket. It's been an honor serving you as always. See you next Tuesday. Or maybe not. As Keisha turned and walked away, James knew he had just witnessed the first move in a full-scale military campaign. She wasn't just a veteran struggling to survive civilian life. She was a strategist weaponizing 6 months of humiliation, and Davidson he didn't even realize war had been declared. The next morning, as Davidson lifted his morning coffee, his phone rang non-stop. The screen flashed Michael Stevens, the company's biggest client. Davidson picked up, still half smirking, glancing over at Keisha like she was still part of some private joke. Davidson, you need to explain yourself. Now Stephen's voice was tight with tension. Explain what Michael Davidson chuckled. What's this all about? About your methods of firing staff based on shady criteria, Stephen snapped. I've just received some very troubling information about your firm. Right then, Keisha walked over, calm as ever. Mr. Stevens. Yes, your company was mentioned quite a lot right here. Mr. Davidson told his friends, and I quote, "We clean up the payroll by eliminating the undesirables," his exact words. Davidson turned pale. How did you... 3 months ago, Kesha said steadily, you clearly explained right at this table how you helped Mr. Stevens lay off employees of color using restructuring as an excuse. She continued, each word sharp and deliberate. You said, the trick is to backdate performance reports. That way they can't sue for discrimination. Lies, Davidson shouted. You made that up. Keisha gave a cold smile. Tony, would you mind bringing me the phone I've been using to record for the past 6 months? The cafe went silent. Tony froze, then silently fetched the phone. In Texas, Keisha added only one-party consent is needed to record a conversation, and I gave mine. Every Tuesday for 6 months, I recorded every admission of discrimination while you thought you were just chatting with a nobody waitress. Tony returned with the phone. Keisha tapped it and played a clip. Davidson's voice rang clearly through the speaker. The trick is never to put race on paper. Use something else. Lateness, low productivity doesn't fit the company culture. Davidson lunged forward, trying to grab the phone, but James stepped in, blocking him. I wouldn't recommend that, he said firmly. Keisha didn't flinch. 6 months of recordings, client names, exact strategies, payouts, it's all there. Davidson's phone rang again. This time it was his wife. What the hell are you doing, Davidson? My sister just sent me an Instagram video you mocking a war veteran in a coffee shop. Keisha raised an eyebrow. Oh, right. I forgot to mention I uploaded that video to your own social media, along with a few fun facts about my military background. Something you never cared to ask about. Davidson shakily opened Instagram. The video already had thousands of views. The bold caption read, CEO of Mitchell and Associates humiliates female veteran with 3 Iraq tours, Sergeant Keisha Johnson, who saved dozens of American soldiers. No, this will ruin everything, Davidson muttered. And one more thing, Keisha said as she handed him a digital folder on her phone. For the past 3 months, I've investigated every corner of Mitchell and Associates' suspicious contracts, unreported payments, links to companies already under federal investigation. She stood up, voice sharp as steel. The recordings have been sent to the Department of Labor, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and 3 organizations that investigate workplace discrimination. Davidson tried to protest, but Keisha cut him off without mercy. The viral video ensures everyone sees your true face. Your clients have been contacted by human rights organizations. Every call you get today is a contract being canceled. Davidson collapsed internally. Why? He whispered. Why didn't you say who you were from the beginning? Keisha met his eyes unwavering. Because people like you need to learn something. Respect isn't just for the uniform. It should be a basic value, a default for every human being. James stepped forward, extending a hand. Sergeant Johnson, it's an honor to witness all of this. As Davidson and Brett stumbled out of the diner in disgrace, Keisha turned to the remaining customers. And what about you? For the past 6 months, how many times have you seen someone get humiliated and chosen to stay silent? 6 months after that fateful day at Ray's diner, Keisha Johnson was no longer the scarred waitress people used to mock. Her story had gone national, turning her into a respected voice for veteran rights and workplace discrimination victims. Ray's Diner, once a place of silent complicity, had become a pilgrimage site for veterans across the country. Tony, the manager, had dedicated a large wall in the diner as the Wall of Honor, featuring Keisha in uniform, beside dozens of portraits of local veterans, people who for the first time felt safe enough to share their stories. Years ago, I had to hide who I was, Keisha said to James during one of their weekly meetups. Now, I couldn't hide it, even if I tried. James smiled, glancing around the now completely transformed diner. Sometimes you have to break to discover just how strong you are. And what about Davidson Mitchell? He was now living a never-ending nightmare. Mitchell and Associates had shut down after losing all its major clients. The The video of him humiliating Keisha surpassed 10 million views, and Davidson's name had become a national symbol of discrimination and corporate incompetence. His wife filed for divorce, taking half of what little remained after several lawsuits were settled. He called Kesha last week begging, "Please, take the recordings offline. I've learned my lesson." Kesha recounted the call to James while pouring coffee for a group of veterans who had driven 200 miles just to meet her. James asked, "What did you tell him?" Kesha shrugged. "I said, some lessons need to be permanent to be effective." The federal investigation triggered by Keisha's recordings exposed a much broader network of discrimination than expected. 12 companies that were former clients of Mitchell and Associates now faced lawsuits for discriminatory practices. Davidson, desperate, was cooperating with authorities in hopes of a reduced sentence. As for Brett, the accountant, he'd lost his license and was now working at a corner convenience store on the other side of town. Every time someone recognized him from the video, he'd lower his head and walk away bearing the shame his own cruel words had earned. But for Keisha, the greatest change wasn't punishment, it was community transformation. People who once pretended not to hear cruel comments now greeted her warmly. Many even apologized for their past silence. The elderly woman who sat in the corner of the diner every morning had become Keisha's most devoted defender, eagerly sharing tales of the town's heroine with anyone willing to listen. In a national podcast on veterans' rights, Keisha shared, "I've learned that respect shouldn't have to be earned with medals or uniforms. It should be automatic. A basic human right." James, who once stopped by the diner just as a break on the road, eventually moved to the town for good. He opened a small consulting office specializing in helping veterans reintegrate into civilian life. He and Keisha became an efficient professional team working together to help dozens of veterans overcome discrimination and hardship in the corporate world. The irony, James once said as they sat together, is that Davidson used prejudice to feel superior, but it only exposed how morally inferior he really was to the entire world. Keisha's story sparked change across 3 states, leading to new laws that protect veterans from hiring discrimination. She testified before congressional committees, her voice calm yet resolute, echoing through the corridors of power in Washington. Tony promoted her to assistant manager, but Keisha only worked part-time at the diner. Most of her time was now spent advising organizations on diversity and inclusion policies. Ironically, many of her current clients were once loyal customers of Mitchell and Associates, now scrambling to salvage their reputations. In a keynote speech at a national veterans conference, Keisha closed with these words, "The best revenge isn't destroying those who hurt you. It's building something so powerful that they're forced to respect what they once tried to crush." Davidson now drives a beat-up old car, a far cry from the BMW he once flaunted. On a return visit to the town, he walked into Ray's diner not to cause trouble, but to beg for one last chance. Keisha served him like any other customer, no change in her tone or expression. When he tried to apologize again, Keisha simply said, "Mr. Mitchell, what happened between us wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a revelation of character. Yours and mine." Her journey had come full circle. The woman who once swallowed every humiliation in silence was now a speaker invited across the country to share her insights on leadership, resilience, and justice. The scars, once symbols of shame, had become marks of bravery. They now inspired thousands. "If this story has touched your heart," Keisha said during a recent televised interview, "remember that we always have the power to choose how we respond to injustice. We can bow our heads in silence or use our inner strength to rewrite our story." The lesson was clear. Davidson tried to break Keisha, but in the end only destroyed himself. Keisha knew that true revenge wasn't retaliation. It was achieving a level of success that her enemies could never even fathom, and doing so with such grace that they'd be forced to confront their own moral decay. Her story didn't end in a small Texas diner. It spread quietly like a slow-burning flame, igniting something in the hearts of millions who had been belittled, ignored, or humiliated. Social media exploded not just with views, but with messages of thanks and testimonies from veterans, scarred women, and employees who'd faced workplace bias, all saying, "I see myself in Keisha." A movement had begun. The hashtag #IamKeisha swept across platforms. Companies that had once ignored employee complaints began revisiting their internal policies. And the media gave her a name, the woman who turned cruelty into the perfect counterstrike. The press came in waves. They invited her to talk shows, offered book deals, publishing contracts. But Keisha, as always, chose carefully, I won't sell my pain for fame, but I will share it if it helps someone else rise. A major broadcasting network released a documentary about her titled Burning Bright, Rising from the Ashes. She stood in the frame, dressed in uniform, holding a cup of coffee in the worn-out kitchen of Ray's diner, her gaze calm and steady. They used to laugh at my scars. Now they call them medals. But what I'm truly proud of is that I never let them strip away my dignity. The consequences for Davidson grew more severe. His bank accounts were frozen, his company office was sealed. Former clients issued public apologies to the community. Some even sent direct apologies to Keisha. She responded with just one sentence: late, but better than never. Next time, choose the right side from the start. Brett now worked night shifts at a convenience store, living quietly. Once he saw Keisha appear on the TV mounted in the store corner, she was being interviewed by CNN. He bowed his head, avoiding his own reflection in the freezer glass. And James. He remained by Keisha's side, not as a hero, but as a teammate. Together, they founded a nonprofit organization, Second Front, supporting veterans, abused women, and marginalized workers. At the opening of their new office in the Capitol, Keisha took the stage in a gray suit. The spotlight highlighted the scar on her wrist. She didn't hide it, nor did she draw attention to it. I'm not standing here because I'm better than anyone else. I'm standing here because I chose not to stay silent. And I hope from today, thousands more will make that choice. The entire room rose in applause, not for a victim, but for a survivor, a victor. Davidson occasionally still drove through town now in an old battered car instead of his flashy BMW. Once he stopped by the diner, not to cause trouble this time, but in a pitiful attempt to find Keisha and say something about misunderstandings and second chances. Keisha greeted him with the same professional courtesy she gave every customer. She poured the coffee, took his order, her tone, even her expression, unreadable. When he tried to apologize once more, she simply said, "Mr. Mitchell, what happened between us wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a revelation of character, yours and mine." Her transformation was now complete. The woman who once endured humiliation in silence was now sought after by corporations, universities, and government agencies to speak on leadership, resilience, and justice. The scars once mocked had become symbols of bravery and sacrifice, inspiring thousands. If this story of transformation and justice speaks to your heart, Keisha said in her most recent televised interview, remember that we always have the power to choose how we face injustice. We can surrender, or use the strength within us to rewrite the story of our lives. The story's final message was as clear as daylight. Davidson tried to destroy Keisha, but in doing so, destroyed himself. And Keisha. She understood that true revenge isn't retaliation. It's succeeding beyond your enemy's imagination with a dignity so powerful it forces them to confront the smallness of their own morality. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed a relaxing and captivating storytelling experience. If you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support gives me the motivation to create more amazing content.